Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about the seller conversations around compensation. If you guys have been here for any of the past sales meetings, we've been talking about the buyer side of things. So we're going to kind of flip the script and talk about sellers now, and how we're having these conversations with our sellers. So don't leave, because we have a special guest that I'm going to be interviewing for that too. So you guys can hear it from another agent's perspective. But until we get there, are we good? We'll just ignore that for a little bit. Our computer's also just like not wanting to cooperate today. So let's go and start with our belief system. So can anyone share? I'm going to go for something a little different. Does anyone have any wins from our belief system? We've got win-win, integrity, customers always come first, commitment, communication, creativity, teamwork, trust, equity, and success. And I will wait until you guys have something. Yeah, go for it.
Sammy and I have something for communication, seek first to understand, because we had a client who just went haywire. And then instead of like cutting them off or whatever, we just tried to unpack it. And yesterday they came back. They went and bought with somebody else, and they're so unhappy with the place they bought that they're selling it literally 2 weeks later. Oh, wow. So wow. We didn't like, I know, but I just thought that was a nice,
Yeah.
So,
that's awesome. Nice. Any other wins or any other things going on in your guys' business, even personal life, that go back to our belief system? Share on. Go for it.
I got a really good accountability partner from the event last week in Traverse City, Jeff Lover's event, and regarding teamwork, I really want to achieve more together. Like this morning, for example, waking up and going for a run. When yesterday was my first day running, getting back to it, and it was a very difficult thing. But I woke up to his text that he ran. He ran. He's from England, so he uses meters. So however many meters.
Like how in front of this.
Right. So he let me know I ran however many meters this morning. He showed me his watch. So I'm like, okay, I gotta get my butt out of bed and go fulfill my end of the bargain also. So teamwork is the one that I
nice.
This morning.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny how that accountability of even just one more person will change it for you. Make you step up. So I would say that, who else was here last week at the summer masterminds? Anyone here for that? Nice. Awesome. That was incredible, right? Like, did you guys all get something out of that? Can I just get like maybe an aha from that? Anyone can share? Doesn't have to tag into this, but just love to hear that too. I feel like I heard a lot of ahas last week. Yeah, come on now.
The first one that stuck out to me is just commitment in all things. When Sarah Reynolds was speaking, just how, she overcame adversity, in her personal life especially, and stayed committed and built, the #1 team in Keller Williams despite personal challenges.
They're not supposed to be waiting to get in because it's not actually on Zoom. We're just using this to record. No, you're good. It'll probably keep happening. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I feel like that was like her keynote speech was so different than like a typical like real estate conference speech, right? Like, or keynote. It was awesome. Anyone else? Any ahas? Any just like really awesome takeaways from that?
Memories don't transfer with the deed.
That's good.
That was pretty good.
Nice. Love it.
Memories don't transfer with the deed.
Cool. All right, so moving on to some dates that we're going to have coming up. So save the date. So our clam bake for this year is going to be on September 20th from 6 to 10. I don't know how to get that to stop doing this, but if you guys just want to ignore it, that's fine. We're actually left. But so make sure you guys mark the calendars for this. I have not personally been there yet, but I've heard that it's a great time. So I heard it's like the event of the year. So make sure you guys are saving the date for that. And then we have a lot of upcoming training. So today we have our Realtor Collab that's still going on. And that topic for this month is basically seller processes and systems and how to win more listings. So if you've not been a part of that, you guys are more than welcome to join. It's an 8 deal in the past 12 month minimum requirement for production. Not to, make anyone not be able to come, but more just to make sure that the conversations are high level conversation with agents who are kind of in the same space for their business. So if you guys have not joined that, you are welcome to join that today, 1:30 to 2:30, and that is on Zoom today. And then this Thursday, we have Shoshana. So she is doing the mid-year reset, unlock your potential, elevate your business, and achieve your goals by year end. I'd love for you to share just a little bit about that.
Sure. There'll be a global workbook Zoom. We did this with our team, And I know we're a little bit past the mid-year, but you know, on the other hand, we're just gonna fake it that it's mid-year still, so don't give up on 2024, it's all still achievable and within our reach.
I love that. Well, and I feel like what's so crazy is when you start thinking about like end year, like end of year, like we're basically already in Q4. Like if you really think about it, what we're doing right now is going to be our Q4, you know, production. So if you think about it like that, everything you're doing right now is going to be something you're going to reap the benefits of in October, November, December. So think about it that way. When everyone else is slow in December, you can say, well, I am not because I did these things in July. So make sure you guys are checking that out. So August calendar is up. So that'll be sent out pretty soon if it's not been sent out yet. So you guys can take a picture of that. But definitely keep an eye out on that. So we have a ton of things coming up so you guys can see that calendar. And then summer luau on August 2nd. So that is coming up from 5 to 7. So that's going to be just a family friendly event that you guys are welcome to bring your kids to. Should be a really fun time. And then, so we have this upcoming training. So this is going to be with Janelle and David, and it's going to be all around basically what questions to ask, you know, your title company and what questions to ask your lender. Do you guys, either of you want to share on that just a little bit?
Sure. We're gearing it towards listing agents, things to ask before you list the property, things to ask your buyer's lender before accepting an offer. Because there's a lot of things that can blow up and surprise you. And that's kind of the gist, but we can go with it however we want.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Audience.
Well, I don't know if anyone else kind of operates like this, but when you have a listing, it's, you know, control your controllables, right? And your biggest things that are a part of that transaction are going to be who the agent is, who the lender is, who the title company is, right? You can't control who the home inspector is going to be. You can't control the buyers, but those three things are the things that we can actually have a little control over. And if you're advocating for your sellers, you need to be asking those questions and make sure you understand. Not saying you can sway who the buyer is going to use, but at least have an understanding of what that person's going to be doing for you, or what that lender is going to operate like, how the title company is, because you can advocate and request that your buyer or that the buyer talk to a different lender. Nothing against that, right? Or title company, negotiating title company. So it is super, super important. Awesome. And then partner updates. So I don't believe Renee's not here. Oh, she is here. There we go. Perfect. Yep. You want to come up here and talk?
So one of the things I've been continually talking about, guys, is buyer agency. And I met with actually the Keller Home Loans partners a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about buyer agency and talking about home warranty at that time. Don't forget that when you're meeting and you're discussing buyer agency, even though they don't have a house to buy, those houses are still going to have problems and things that can go wrong. So talking to them about negotiating a home warranty into any home that they buy is planting a seed and telling them that we're going to make sure that we have some protection for you after closing. Talk with your lenders and your partners about including it in the loan estimate so that they already have that charge in there, and then it's not an add-on. Same thing with sellers. When you're talking about listing with a home warranty, have it included in the net sheet. That way they're already saying, okay, this is my bottom line. This is what I like to see. And when you get to the document of the home warranty, they're going to say, well, wait, I don't want to pay anymore. And you can say, well, you're not. It's already in your net sheet. So just little ways to plant seeds to make sure that there's a warranty included in everything, because that's what you have to turn to after closing. So if you have questions about this, or if you want to explore it more or talk with lenders about it, let me know. I'm always around, just a phone call away.
Awesome. Thanks, Renee. All right. And then we've got, okay. Yeah, you're good.
Hey guys, a couple of things that we're seeing lately that I really want you to focus on. There are so many changes, obviously, with the buyer's agreement. Your escrow letters are so crucial to get paid, guys, correctly. We had 4 instances this week. I'm not going to say what brokerage, but it was very close to home, that we had discrepancies on commissions. So make sure you're looking at your Alta statement, not only for your client, but for you and how you get paid. It's a lot easier to correct prior to your client signing than go back and ask this buyer or seller for money or rebates or something. So make sure you understand your commission. Make sure you understand who's paying what, so that it's very clear to your escrow officers. The other thing that are seen a lot are a ton of for sale by owners. Couple of things to say about that. Number one, if that's somebody that you'd like to plan a tag, like a farm to that, I do have a magic letter for withdrawn and for sale by owner sellers that have maybe expired. And the other thing is too, if you are on the selling side, if you're the selling agent working with a for sale by owner, please make sure, and I'm sorry, you guys are going to have to do this. Make sure that if they are listing under an LLC, a trust, something, that they have their documents. We've had 3 instances this week where things did not close because we asked for, or they never told us. Somebody was married. Oh, we're at the closing table. Guess what? We had no idea. So just make sure you have to do your due diligence if you are representing your buyer with the for sale by owner.
Awesome, thank you. Great, and then perfect timing. We got Sean, he's gonna come up here from cross country. And I think he's also gonna share a couple more things today too about the taxes. Yep.
And I apologize. I thought we were back to a Zoom, so I just ran up the stairs.
Oh,
So
you're so right.
Yeah.
What happened?
Rip Haskey, he mentioned something yesterday and totally threw me off. So I
Oh,
blame
that's
him.
hilarious.
So first off, interest rate wise, 30-year fix kind of sort of snug back under 7%. Federal Reserve Board meeting later this month, there will be no drop to the interest rate. September meeting, literally. Yeah. So
with my gargoyle.
bad idea. So Federal Reserve Board inflation is coming back a little faster than sort of the last prediction or the last forecast. Some other economic indicators, employment going up a little bit. So it looks like maybe a perfect storm of things falling into place for that drop with the Fed in September, maybe even once or twice still after that before the end of the year. So sort of the vibe, the feeling is interest rates. Now, we don't think there's going to be a sudden drop because all of this was with this expected to happen anyway. So just give a little bit more firm ground to say. So the other bigger news, which, and I apologize, may have talked a little bit about this, but the tax assessment. So everybody in Cuyahoga County by now should have gotten their letter saying your value was this, your value will now be that. What does that mean? There's a web page that the general consumer doesn't know that's out there, but you can click on it, put in the old and the new, and it'll kind of tell the homeowner what the taxes will be. So what I'm telling customers is put money aside, because we all know tax values have gone up for just about every house, which means everyone's taxes are going to go up. But every lender, even on the loans we're closing now, we're collecting taxes off of this last bill that just came out last month. So this December, a new bill is going to come out that we know is going to be in excess of what we've been collecting, and everyone's going to have a shortage. So everyone's going to get double hit. Their mortgage payment's going to go up, or I should say their total mortgage with escrow is going to go up because the taxes are short or are higher. But then to cover the shortage, they're going to get double hit. So just to give you, this is an extreme example, but had somebody last year, the school board, forced the county to reassess values on this street. The person's mortgage payment went from $2,200 to $3,000. She called, before even calling me, she called her realtor to list the house. She'd only been in the house for 6 months and was ready to list the house. She was hitting the panic. So I guess that could create opportunity for listings, but really you as the advisor should really let them know this is coming. This one, no one would predict it. I mean, this was in Cuyahoga County and they did the not, the sort of 3-6 year reannualization or assessment. So stay ahead of this. If you're looking for a reason to call your sphere and it's not about interest rates, or you can do both. It's all about rates this week and then the taxes next week. But that is a big, next year, rates, maybe they dip, taxes go up. You're going to see a lot of people refinancing to get a lower interest rate and end up with the same payment because the taxes have gone up. And we've seen that oftentimes before. So it's out there. If you want, I could forward an email out, but the link for that site is pretty user friendly. I'm also attaching an article from Brains. I mean, if you hopefully have seen this map before, but I think the lowest property estimated valuation changes are like 20-25%, 49% for City of Cleveland, 66% for East Cleveland. So there are some big changes coming. The other part to be familiar with, if you want to, sort of what your value added as far as being a realtor, read them that line in prorations. If you remember, taxes are being prorated based on the most recent tax bill. Another tax bill is going to come out in December. That tax bill is for the first half of this year. Anybody who's closed pretty much any time in this year may be entitled to a refund or a readjustment from the seller. That happens between the buyer and the seller. Title company's out of it, agents are out of it, but obviously, you want to be proactive to let them know what's in there, what that means, and how to adjust it. I would say that's definitely value added for a realtor, whether you're on the buying or listings.
Oh.
So
Any questions on that?
I'm still up for it. Plus the adrenaline going talking about taxes. So if you want that Cranes article, just let me know, or the link, again, it's out there. It's pretty easy to find, but I would absolutely use this as your, time to be an expert and to go to. Oh, and one other item, as I understand it, they're not reassessing if you're arguing against the valuation. They used to take comps. So you're a realtor just dumping out comps all the time. I believe they're only doing appraisals now. So you may have to do a whole new appraisal. And anyone who bought a house, if there was an appraisal done, the lender can always provide that. Granted, an appraisal from 3 years ago is going to be meaningless, but any recent purchases, obviously, your lender's going to be happy to provide it.
Yeah, and this is a good time too, that if you have a good relationship with an appraiser that is willing to do reassessments like this, and basically go back and kind of fight the value. That's always an option. I always tell people because this happened in Summit County last year.
Yeah.
And it was a huge deal last year. So we had sellers or, owners calling us left and right saying, hey, this went up. How do I change this? How do I adjust this? And it's always a double-edged sword. You have to make sure that you're really educating them on, what that means to reassess it. Are you planning on selling in the next 6 months? Let's not maybe reassess this. You want your value to be as high as you can get it. You don't want to go back and try to say my house is not worth that and then go and sell it for that price, But I think that that's something that you can absolutely do. We had an appraiser who was basically reaching out and saying, hey, I'm willing to do this. This is my fee to do this. I'm willing to do it basically just, outside of the typical process through a lender, through an appraiser. But there are appraisers that are willing to do that because for them, this is pretty quick, easy money, on the side. So, that's always an option. I would say we have to look at pros and cons. Is it $400 to $500 for an appraisal and you're saving, $100 a month? What does this look like? Is it worth it over the next few years? Probably worth it. Depends on what you get. It could also be that you're spending $400 to have the county say, sorry, it's staying. That also happens a lot too. So
I had one conversation yesterday. It said, hey, if that doesn't work, keep your appraisal because the buyer's going to get out of PM on it too. So there's always that.
yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good idea. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts on this? Cool. Thanks, John. One of the things that too, I was in the Tony Giordano breakout session last week with Summer Masterminds. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me that I was like, why have we not thought about this way is, you are that advisor for your clients through life. And if you're not reaching out and telling them this type of information and really staying in touch with them consistently about all types of things with their home, then you're going to be out of sight, out of mind. And if you can be the person that's communicating this information to them up front versus waiting for them to call you, you're going to be seen as the expert and the person that they trust with information about real estate. So he has this whole thing that he uses technology-wise to kind of, basically create this FICO score for your home, which is super cool. But aside from that, it's being that person reaching out to that client, that owner, even if it's 5 years, 7 years, doesn't matter how long since they bought their house, about updates to their home. Is this going to add value? Is this a good resale value update to do? Should I do this type of, backsplash or this type of backsplash? I'm thinking about selling my home in 2 years. What types of updates should I put money into? Because how many times have we seen that our sellers, our owners will put in updates that they think are going to get them dollar for dollar or a ton of money back when they're selling their home. And it's well, that's great that you did this amazing thing to your one full bathroom, but really what would have added a lot more value is to add a second bathroom, right? It does add value, but it doesn't add as much as what you're thinking it's going to, or whatever that might be, right? But being in touch with those clients and making sure that they're coming to you for that information versus, having to wait for it, and that you're going to them hopefully first, but it does create that back and forth relationship. And then the other thing is I would say on this topic, with your buyers right now, since we know this is coming up and this is going to adjust and it's going to change, make sure your buyers are aware of that clause he's talking about in our contract, when it comes to prorations, that they understand they're hearing it from you. So the first time they hear it is not in December, right? That they're not well, you didn't tell me, you knew you didn't tell me. So just have that conversation now so they kind of know, this could adjust a little bit. If they're already at the very, very top of what they can afford, we don't want to have that conversation in 6 months of them saying, I got to list my house because I can't afford it, right? So this is great. Awesome. Liz, saw her right here. Liz is very quiet here today. Really quiet.
We're focused.
Right? It's good.
Everyone just wants to know how to deal with their sellers.
Fun stuff.
So I've mentioned this the last couple of times I've been in front of you guys this month. So for those of you who were on Zoom or in River, forgive me, but it's just something I kind of want to stress to kind of agents in general. A few weeks ago, I had an agent tell me that they did not want to communicate with me as a transaction coordinator. That they only wanted to talk to the agent involved. And the reason being that they just didn't want to say things twice, which honestly is a little bit ridiculous, because if you send an email and you just CC me on it, you're only saying it once. But I realized basically what it means is that agents don't understand the value that a transaction coordinator provides. Because TC is not there to make things more difficult. The TC is actually there to make things easier for everyone involved. You know, I don't just handle the paperwork. That's a lot of, you know, what I do, what TCs do, but it's not all of it. However, there is something to say for when, as agents, you're out on the road, and, you know, you're not always by your computer. You have appointments, you have, you know, all these places that you're going. But as a TC, like, I'm behind my computer during normal business hours. So if an addendum comes across, I can send it way faster than you can when you're driving. And so it actually can speed up the whole process when you bring the TCs along, when you allow them to actually help you and support you, because that addendum is going to get sent out almost immediately rather than having to wait for whenever you can next pull off to the side of the road, pull out your computer and send it. And it's, like I said, it's not just the paperwork. You know, as a TC, I make sure that I am checking in regularly with, you know, title, the lender, making sure, you know, the point of sale is moving along. I actually had an agent recently who's getting ready to list a property. I was like, okay, that's great. Where are we at with the point of sale? She's like, East Cleveland doesn't have a point of sale. I was like, yes, it does. So she's like, oh crap, we need to order that. So it's like, it's another, just another set of eyes as well. I've had, you know, agents mention that they got to closing and then all of a sudden the lender's like, yeah, we haven't even ordered the appraisal. Which is another hurdle that may have been, you know, overcome if, you know, someone was there checking in regularly. So, you know, TCs just keep track of deadlines, you know, make sure everything is going along smoothly as it should. And it's just another set of eyes to make sure that, you know, the initials aren't missed, you know, all those types of things. So, and for anyone who's, you know, well, I want to do it all myself, just remember that all other professionals have support. Like, you don't go to the doctor's office and the doctor's the one who checks you in and takes your, takes your vitals and everything. Like, they have, you know, they have someone at the front who's going to check you in. They have the nurse who's going to take all of your vitals. So it doesn't actually look negatively on you when you use and trust a TC. It's actually just you showing that you are a professional, and that you are focusing on the thing that you are good at. So
yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, and I think on that topic too, like when it comes to transaction coordinators, I've used one since 2017, I want to say, and like created it myself because it wasn't normal at that time. I was just like, okay, this is something I can do. I'm gonna like write my own scripts and do this thing. Like, she already has everything ready for you. So literally you say, hey, I want to work with her, and she's gonna already have literally the process like ready. So you're not having to like reinvent the wheel. It's already ready to go. Now, can you tweak it? Can you make adjustments? I'm sure that you can customize that for yourself a little bit, but I do think that's really helpful because you're not having to like build it yourself. And from someone who's used one, like I said, for a lot of years, I think that it does look great for your clients because it does have that extra added layer of protection for you. It's just kind of like, you're obviously she's not doing your job for you, but she is a second set of eyes. She's a double protection to make sure things aren't missed, you know? And I'm always like, well, if something gets through me and my TC, all right, then like, how did we miss this? You know, but like that never happens. Like, I think that's happened like one time in the past couple of years. So it's really helpful, but your clients, they'll appreciate it because they're getting communicated with way more often, way more consistently than what you're probably going to communicate with them on your own, just because you're out there, you know, in the business working with their clients, right? Like, that's where you need to be spending your time, is working with your clients, high level, you know, client conversations, relationships, you know, and selling homes, right? Like, that's your focus. So leveraging out this one other piece is always something that is, you know, that first step in finding leverage for your business to be able to keep building and keep growing. But your clients are going to appreciate it because, again, they're having a higher level of experience with you throughout the entire process because of someone on your team. Like they don't know that Liz works with other agents. They think that Liz works with you and only you, right? And I think that's the power also of having a TC too. So not to sell her, but if anyone wants to talk to Liz, talk to Liz. She is awesome. Great. And then David. It's so quiet today. It's like weirdly quiet today.
Talk about taxes,
I know, it just kills the room.
interest
over
rates
here.
and taxes, right? I mean, that's the best we got. So more housing news that is actually of interest. I read yesterday that, what do you think the average person that's sitting on the fence is waiting to buy, where they want to see rates? What increase would they be willing to accept from where they are? 2% higher, 1%? Well, everybody wants lower, but there's people that are willing to buy, they're willing to go a little bit higher, right? If there's people buying today, there's plenty of people still closing their homes. If rates go to, right now we're below 7%. If rates get to 6.5, there's about another 4 million people in the country that are willing to buy. That will move the needle. If rates go to 6 and 8, there's an additional 5 million. So there's a lot of people sitting there that are real close right now to getting into the market. It's not going to take a whole lot we don't need to see rates get into the 5s to move that needle. So you got to get these people ready, because when that market comes, it's going to happen quick. It's going to, everyone, it's hard enough right now to get an offer accepted because there's so low of inventory. Once those rates drop, it's going to get crazy. So the buyers that you have that are out there, have them, get them ready because they're that market's going to come real soon. One of the things we're doing right now that's working super well with this tight inventory is fully underwritten approvals, loan commitments in advance of making offers. Not a pre-approval, not a pre-qualification. The only thing we need is an appraisal and title and homeowners insurance, but that's it. You go in with that offer. When I call listing agents and tell them that we already have a loan commitment in hand, I mean, they're like, holy cow, I had 3 out of 4 get accepted this past week, with that. It's a huge difference maker. The only one that didn't get accepted is because he lowballed the offer. He wouldn't listen. But other than that, good news ahead. I think the market's going to be next 6 to 12 months a lot more improved than where we've been.
That's awesome. Thanks, David. Well, and I would say on that topic with like having it fully underwritten, I'd imagine you guys can close it quicker because of that too. Like, do you guys have the ability to close it a lot quicker? Yeah. Nice. So that's so under 2 weeks for, a loan is not obviously very common. Yeah. You can compete with cash buyers in that sense, when you're up against those. So that's awesome. Whatever you can do to get your offers accepted, right? Awesome. All right. Now we're on to the fun part. So I'm going to go ahead and have Jen come up here. She is our special guest for today.
It was supposed to be one of 3.
It was supposed to be 1 of 3 / 1 of 2 / we have Jen today. Yeah. Jen is going to be fantastic. So we're going to just have kind of a fun back and forth conversation about how she's communicating with her sellers. Okay. And specifically around the buyer agent compensation, what that looks like, how she is having these conversations as far as explaining it to them. So I'm going to get through a few questions with her first. And then if you guys have a question, that's really pertaining to that specific one, go ahead and raise your hand, we'll chime in. And then, we've got a good amount of time. So if you guys have questions at the end, even just for the room, kind of masterminding around it, we'll open it up as well. So let me just say thank you for Jen for coming in. So I have had the pleasure of getting to know Jen over the last couple of months. And I asked her because I think that she is very high level with how she's communicating with her clients, with her buyers, with her sellers, and just her mindset around this entire change. I feel like she's been very optimistic and positive about it. It's not been this doom and gloom, which is nice because I think that's what a lot of the industry is kind of, putting out there right now. There's a lot of fear going on. So I wanted to kind of just highlight her because I think that, it's helpful to hear another agent who's having these real conversations right now, with their sellers and kind of understanding what's going through her mind. There's no right or wrong way to these things. I think that it's really just a matter of what you're going to communicate and how you're going to communicate it the best, what's the most comfortable for you. But just a couple of things kind of come from her. So thank you for being here. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get into the question part of this, just so you guys are aware of this. Obviously we started, requiring the buyer representation agreements on July 1st. So if you're not using that yet, make sure you're using that. You'll get a notification if you're not. But those have to be attached to every one of our buyer transactions. Now, I did want to clarify, because I've gotten this question a couple of times. So I'm going to put Andrew on the hot seat for 2 seconds on this. When we have a buyer that is coming to the table on our listing that we are not representing, do we need a buyer representation agreement on that? Thank you. So what that means is that if you have someone that walks through your open house for the first time, you've never met them before, you don't have a relationship, that is not true dual agency, and you're not representing that buyer, which means that we don't need a buyer representation agreement. Okay. So obviously we'll need a compensation agreement of how you're going to get paid from the seller. That's going to be a part of the listing, but that buyer is at that point in time unrepresented. So we would not have a buyer representation agreement with them. Does that make sense? So just
who's writing the contract for them?
the listing agent. So you would still, as a listing agent, write the contract,
But on the bottom.
but the buyer is unrepresented because they don't have an agent. So at that point in time, you're representing the seller, the buyer's unrepresented. Does that
And
make
when
sense?
you're writing the contract,
Even if you're writing the contract.
What do you
Yep.
sign for agency disclosure? It's the dual,
just
but
one.
Dual but represent the seller.
Yep.
The
One
seller.
agent representing just the seller.
yeah.
Correct. It's not dual agency. It's one agent representing.
Dual agency.
Well, right,
It's
exactly.
in the category where there's one agent.
Right.
That doesn't
Right.
mean dual agency.
Right.
Yeah. So does that make sense? Cool. I just wanted to talk about that because I feel like that's a very big misconception, and it's probably been a misconception for a long time. But now that we have the buyer agreement, we're having, buyers that are calling on a listing and they refuse to sign the buyer agreement, which means we can't show the house. Not really, right? So you're working on behalf of the seller. You're showing the house. They're not representing the process. So as long as they're aware and they understand that. Now, obviously, they are more than welcome to have another agent represent them in the process. So
then does that agent get the full commission?
that would be something that's negotiable, obviously at that point in time between that agent and the seller. Right. So just a little FYI, because I wanted to have Andrew specifically state, I guess on that one. So again, that's one little just FYI. The other thing I wanted to bring up to you guys is that on August 12th, I think it's August 12th. Yeah. The compensation section of our MLS is going to be gone. So there's no longer going to be a section where you can put in there what your compensation is, graduated, 3%, whatever it is, that's all going away. And it's gonna be about a week before when it's being required to go away. So they're gonna kind of work out those bugs and kinks that need to be worked out, which is good, before it's required of our MLS. And what that means is that there's gonna be a new tab at the bottom where it's a checkbox of either, it'll say concessions. And the concession tab is gonna say yes, no, or negotiable, right? So that concession option is basically saying you're offering a concession to the buyer, not to the buyer's agent, to the buyer, right? And then that's where your buyer's agents know that the seller is at least open to offering a concession and what that looks like. So just so you guys are aware, so you're not like, where do I put this in for my listing? I don't know how to do this anymore. That's what that's switching over to. So again, I want to be proactive with you guys. Again, we're still almost a month out, 3 weeks out from that changing. But the more that you guys are aware of this, and the first time that it happens, I'm sure Andrew will get a few less phone calls as far as what am I supposed to do? Right? Like that's what that is. So cool.
Good question.
Fun housekeeping
So
things.
there can't be anywhere, any place noting what the seller is offering for a buyer's agent.
Correct.
compensation.
Correct.
Well, define any place.
Like sometimes it will get to know.
On the MLS.
Something in the MLS or attached to the MLS, no.
Okay,
But
Or
like
broker
on a
comments.
supplement.
Facebook or,
On
no,
a supplement.
that's attached to the
That's
MLS.
what I'm asking.
No. Yeah, no, you can't have a link in the MLS that goes to another website that tells you what the compensation is. Can't have any.
You can't have that.
How will you know
How will you know what?
what the compensation is?
You have to call.
You have to have a conversation with
So-
the agent, right?
Every person that shows the house is.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Buyer's agent shouldn't get paid.
Do you have,
They don't
like,
work very hard.
Marketing flyers in the house, like,
Yeah.
FA offering.
Anything that's not attached to the MLS.
Yep.
You can
Yeah.
put on your yard sign.
In big letters.
Just another brokerage, 2 agents. Okay, they're doing separate, websites.
Yeah.
for house. So just, it's out there. I'm not saying that that might be the kibosh pretty soon. They weren't involved in the settlement. But just to know that's what.
Well, you
he's
can
trying to
do
get
that.
us
You just
done.
can't link that in the MLS. You couldn't like put the link to that property website in the MLS.
Right.
But you could You could put it on some website in the world.
I mean, the
sure.
first step that I would do is like just Google the house, like see if someone has a website out there for that house that's saying what it is. You never know. I mean, there's gonna be some interesting things as far as how this is gonna work out, but at the end of the day, just so you guys are aware of that, as a listing agent, as representing the seller, that part is not gonna be on there. And we can obviously have a way deeper, longer, further conversation as far as like the best ways to approach it, with your buyers and how that can work. But that is not our conversation for today. So moving on to onto all this, I wanted to start with a question of how have your conversations changed with your sellers since all of this has been starting to come about?
As shocking as it is, some haven't heard the news because it's our world, right? So then I say, oh, here's a link, and I send them the link. And then without a whiteboard, I draw out what was and what is and give them my recommendation, but say, as always, it's your decision how we're gonna compensate. But I do not see a single benefit to not offering compensation to the buyer's agent because there are people that won't come and show your house. Then if they really don't want to, I say, let's lower your price by 3%. And then they can add their commission back in because that was the entire argument of the settlement was that we were overcharging for houses to cover compensation. They never liked that answer.
Right. Well, and I think that's really what it comes down to is like when you're having the conversations with your sellers, like understanding what this really looks like for them and understanding that, okay, we're at this point, we're talking about this or this, right? So we can't have our cake and eat it too. So what's going to give, right? Like we can't not offer it and then still ask the same price because then that buyer is going to be double or is going to be charged twice, right? So at that point in time, we need to figure out what this is going to look like. And I think that's a great point is,
The diagram of what was is always seller, agent, we agree, and I put 6%, I say, but of course it's always negotiable. I said, the seller agreed to a percent to sell their house. Why did they get to dictate how we spent that money once it was in our pocket? I said it was to your benefit. So I just say it's worked for 40 years. I think 9 out of 10 people are going to go forward the way it was. So why would you miss the boat on that opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, do you have any pushback a lot of times on that? Or do you feel like they typically will understand and they'll see reason in it and they feel comfortable with that?
I have not gotten pushback on any listing agreement or buyer agency.
Okay.
Ever. It's just kind of come from a position of know your worth, be able to explain it, and don't sound nervous about it. It is. It's not me. It's literally a mandate that you have to sign this buyer agency, and everyone wants the same thing in the end to make the most money from the sale of their home. So you really are their ally and come at it from a team perspective.
Yeah, I like the word ally on that because I feel like when you're setting up that relationship in the very beginning, having these conversations around, we're on the same team here. Like I'm your ally. I'm here to work on your behalf, right? Like I always go back to the word fiduciary because people understand that word, right? Like I have a legal obligation to look out for best interest. I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't explain this to you and make sure that you understand all of the, pros and cons of this, right? And I feel like what you said as far as just be comfortable with the conversation, you're not going to be comfortable the first time you do it.
No,
But-
and the first 2 times I did it, one was, through Loop because we were unable to talk. But I said, you guys are my guinea pigs. And they were, because it was the first time I had to explain that you're going to owe me money or not. I said, there's 3 options. The seller, or for the buyer side,
Yeah,
the
for the
seller's going to pay it all. You're going to pay it all, but it's most likely going to be somewhere in the middle. But I used the word guinea pig. I said, but we're all going to have to do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key is this is not just an us thing, right? Like this is not just we are requiring this. This is nationwide. This is not just us, right? Like this is every realtor in every company, no matter what, every buyer, every seller is going to have this conversation. And shame on the agents that are not having the conversations, because if they're not, then that buyer is potentially going to be in a tough situation when they find a house, right? Or a seller that doesn't understand, why am I not getting very many showings? Well, we didn't put this in there as an option, right? So again, like there's all different ways that people can go about this. One of the things that I've heard someone say that I really like, and I'm not sure if you've heard this before, but we're just moving money on paper. It's not the fact that things are getting paid, like we can keep the pay the same, but it's just how it's getting paid, right? Like if it's going to be offered as a concession to the buyer and the buyer is choosing to use that money to pay their agent, it's going through the buyer and paying the agent versus just coming straight from the brokerage to the buyer's agent brokerage, right? So that was obviously a little bit more direct, but at this point, what it's done, and I appreciate this to some extent because it's bringing an awareness to our industry and to the clients that we're working with around how we are getting compensated. They do feel like they have control in the matter. They feel like they understand it better. So no one is going to feel taken advantage of at the end of the day. Our industry has always had a reputation that, I mean, we line up with, another industry that's not as reputable, right? Like we want to be a reputable industry. We want to be high level. So why not have these conversations and be the professional for them, right? But I just love that. I mean, for someone who's a numbers person, we're just moving money on paper, right? Like they understand what that means. So on that topic too, I mean, I know you kind of went over it a little bit as far as addressing their questions, but drawing it out, do you do that every time or do you typically address their question a different way depending on how they ask or?
I bring it up.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's every real estate page, every Keller Williams Facebook page is talking about it every day. So I get it out of the way.
Yeah.
But I think most people, I don't care, just sign, which happens. But for everyone else, the diagram really is simple. Like you agreed to 6% in the past and it always worked. And I would draw 4 lines off of it. And this is where the money went. He said, so I don't know how to explain it any better than that, but I just say like,
What do the 4 lines go to?
agent's brokerage, buying agent, buyer's brokerage. So that 6%, how you already agreed to the 6%. So why would you change it now?
Mm-hmm.
Because did you think you were giving 6% just to one person? We were your fiduciary. We distributed the money to get you the highest price for your house.
Right.
Taking a huge chunk of people out of the ability to even look at your house because there are agents who are not going to be able to write or understand how to write concessions.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. There are going to be agents that have no idea how to be creative. And I hope that that's going to be a class coming soon, like how to structure, like 3 different ways to structure concessions. Kash Sagapi had a great class. And I will forward that to share out to everyone about VA. FHA follows VA and VA has specific language to have concessions paid back to the buyer's agent. So it's convoluted. You agreed to 6%. Why?
Right. Yeah. And I also like the fact that she is addressing it right up front, right? Like it's kind of the elephant in the room, if someone knows about it, but they don't know how to ask about it because it's awkward, like talking about money can be awkward. I think that her addressing it again is being the professional in the room, right? Like this is a change in my industry. This is something that's happening. I want to make sure that you're aware of this. Let's have a conversation around it. And if they don't know about it, again, they feel enlightened because like, I had no idea. Like, thank you so much for telling me about this. Like, I wasn't sure, like I wasn't aware of this. So I feel like being comfortable and confident in that, and I think that going back to your value proposition, going back to what your value is as a seller or as a listing agent for a seller, you're providing as much as you can to that seller and giving them as much as you possibly can to market their home, sell their home for the highest amount possible, right? And I'm reading this book right now. It's called Worthy. If anyone hasn't read it, it looks like it's for women, but I feel like everyone should read it. And there's a difference between being confident in something because you have practice on it, you've done it over and over, you feel confident, you've gotten some wins, and having that self-confidence and having self-worthiness to it. And that worthiness is you really deciding, am I worthy of this? Like this goes to being a buyer's agent, right? Am I worthy of asking for my fee for what I'm delivering to this client, right? Is a buyer's agent worthy of this? And when you have that conversation with yourself, you look at it differently, right? Like you look at for your business, for yourself, like where are you looking at this? How are you looking at this? So just a little books for you guys to put on the back burner for a little bit. But I think it's really important to make sure that you understand what your value is and you understand what the value of the buyer's agent is. Now, I think that the interesting thing is we're going to see buyer's agents that are not providing the same value and they're not going to get the same compensation. At the end of the day, if you're offering that concession to a buyer, if it's a 3% concession and that buyer's agent has said, I will take 1%, they're only going to get 1%. That extra 2% is then going to the buyer for something, right? So I think that's something that we have to be aware of is that, as a buyer's agent, we're only gonna get what our buyer representation agreement is stating, right? So again, have that worthiness for yourself as well.
There are a lot of agents that are using that form right now and just leaving it all blank. Because they just, experienced agents who just feel uncomfortable with putting in a fee, because I've been in the business, I know this person will treat me fair, but we've all dealt with agents who are like here one day and gone the next, and they're the ones that aren't gonna, honor a more equitable split in commission.
Yeah.
So cover yourself.
No, I love that. So I think I already know the answer to this, but just to kind of like reiterate it again, do you typically have a standard of offering it versus not offering it? I mean, do you hold, like, if you were to have a seller who is adamant that they're not willing to pay it, how do you handle that conversation? And again, this is not saying that you have to do it this certain way. By no means, there are ways that everyone can run their business differently. I just want to hear from her how she's handling this.
So the same thing with price. Like, I always, after I've met with a client, saw their property, I always have a range in my mind, actually written down a range, like high to low. And I say, I have a number in my head. And you can do none of what I recommend, all of what I recommend, or some, and that's how we're going to determine the price.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, the number falls on the high end, right? That they come up with, which is fine. But a lot of them think they know the market better than I do, or they know the value of their home. And in this market, your house could be worth 100,000 more than the highest, right? So I say, I'm willing to list your house at any price you want. And I got that from Shoshana, I think, before I was ever an agent here, that on one of her listing packets, she has dates agreed to ahead of time of when price reductions are going to happen. And I say, we can list at your number for X number of days or X number of showings, but then we're agreeing to this price on this date. So the same thing, I will list your house offering no compensation. Let's see how it goes. Nothing would make me happier for you than if you got the best offer in the world offering no compensation.
So question for Andrew again, hot spot, hot seat. If they were to do something like that and not offer the concession to the buyer up front and then decide after the fact that they want to offer it, is that just something where you basically, because it's not in the listing agreement at that point, just put it in as negotiable at that point?
I mean, even saying you're not willing to offer it doesn't stop a person from asking
for it, right?
Yeah, it's not contractual in any way. It's just their stance.
Right. Yeah, and I think that,
will that be required to choose any of them, or it's totally?
Won't be required.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think it was just Mike and myself and Andy that got to go to the Glover U thing last week after the summer masterminds. And one of the sessions that they did was a live objection handling with sellers on stage with Jeff Glover. And it was so good. If you have a chance to watch any of those or see what his scripts are or anything like that, just watching how he handles these conversations. One of the things that stuck out to me was how, he would just keep going, keep asking questions until finally they committed to what you're looking for. And I think that it comes down to, educating. Well, it sounds like, and getting to know what that seller's goals are, right? Why are they selling their home? Are they looking to move closer to their grandkids? Do they need to be in a certain home before winter? Are they downsizing? What does it look like for them? Or is it the opposite? They need more space. They need to be in this school district by this date, right? There's so many things that are pushing someone to buy or sell a house. And at the end of the day, if you go back to that motivation for them and you talk about that with them and you say, well, listen, we can list it at this price or we can do it with no concession. But it sounds to me here's our timeline. If we do that and we just wait and see what happens if we lose 2 weeks or 30 days on the market, and at that point in time, it's proven that you're going to end up taking less money at that point because it's sat on the market. Time on the market means someone's going to think there's something wrong with it, right? Or that was overpriced and they're going to come in with a lower offer and try to negotiate that, right? That's just naturally what a buyer is going to do. So do you want to put yourself in that position where a month from now, we're starting over again with basically less control over what the market can do at that point in time? Or do you want to just upfront, let's put everything we can into this and be able to say, this is what we're doing, right? We're going to give everything we have. We're going to offer the concession. We're going to offer it the price that we feel like it's going to sell it, and continuing to push to that basically solution. And a lot of times, a seller is going to eventually realize well, yeah, you're right. I don't want to lose 30 days. I don't want to be moving after Christmas or moving in the week of Thanksgiving or whatever that looks like. And going back to that motivation for them, you can dig deep, you can keep asking questions and going back to that. Not saying you're always going to get it, but at least you have that conversation with them up front of, hey, this is again, pros and cons, you know, like, yeah, we can wait and see, and maybe you get it, and I'm your cheerleader, and I'm here to say congratulations, you know, and I'm happy for you. At the end of the day, I'd way rather be wrong on this than be right on this, and your house sits on the market for 30 days and it's a stagnant listing, right? So again, I feel like that's just going back to like really educating yourself on how to have these conversations with your buyers and your sellers, you know, from a confident, you know, in a confident way. So just a little side topic on that. So when it comes to educating your sellers on the different pros and cons, we've talked about this a lot as far as, you know, you go through, you know, your diagram and you explain it that way. Do you typically go into the pros and cons of paying a buyer for the buyer, you know, concession for the buyer agent?
No.
Okay.
If they ask me to, but no one has.
Okay.
I think when you say this is how long I've been doing this, you know, my, you know, days on market, depending, that type of thing. I really have not had anyone say no to it. And I think it's a huge part of the delivery. I also throw in, you know, especially for the buyer side, like Keller Williams required this starting July 1st nationally. It's August 17th, the buyer agency. I said, we always get ahead of the curve so that we're more comfortable than the other agents in the field discussing it. We knew it was coming. We're dealing with it. It's head on, but no one has said, now, I think that price point is going to be a big driver of who is and isn't willing. And I'm fortunate that that has not been an issue with mine, but there will be people who can't afford to pay it, especially if they bought, you know, at 7% and their taxes went up and they need money to clear closing. But I think the lower price point will have a bigger issue with this change than the upper price point.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think that this is going to impact our first-time home buyers, first-time home sellers, probably the most. Just because, again, there's just less to work with there, right? Like, how many buyers do we have that need concessions already, you know, in order to buy a house? So, you know, we have to, again, have that conversation with our sellers, and it's twofold, where it's tight for you as the seller, but it's also tight for the buyers, right? And, you know, we can work through this, however this looks like. The other thing too, I feel like just something that's kind of helpful and something to think about too, is that on our MLS, it's not going to say what the concession is, right? So it's yes, no, or negotiable, right? So that's also something where, you know, what I would recommend if I were, again, on the listing agent side, is educate your sellers, give them the worst case scenario. You know, this is your bottom line. Like, I mean, even what she was saying earlier, what Renee was saying, is build in the home warranty, build in, you know, all these expenses so that they know their bottom line, worst case scenario, right? At different price points, you know, build it in with a 3% concession to the buyer. And then at that point in time, when you're putting it in as negotiable, understanding that, like, you know, maybe this is something that is negotiable and the buyer doesn't choose to take that full amount and they choose to pay that, right? So again, like, having that conversation of like, we're going to offer this, you know, but at the end of the day, like, I want to make sure that you're educated, that you understand what your bottom line is. Best case scenario, you're not paying the full amount, right? So again, like, I just think it's important to make sure that your sellers, even if they say they're not willing to pay it, that doesn't mean that a buyer is not going to ask for it, right? So even if you're putting no in the MLS, still give that seller the bottom line. So worst case scenario, you're telling me that if we get an offer, a full price offer right now, and it's offering you exactly what you want for closing, exactly what you know what you want for possession, maybe they waive their inspections, it's really a no-brainer for you, and they're asking for a 3 or a 2.5%, concession, you're going to say no. Most likely you're like, well, I mean, yeah, I'd probably consider that. Okay. Then we're going to base this on, let's offer this, or we're going to say, this is what it could be, because yeah, great. Best case scenario, you get it and the buyer pays it and it's all, sunshine and rainbows, but we're also not going to lose a buyer, and I don't want you to say, I'm not willing to sell my house because of this 2.5%. Like, I'm educating you up front. This is what your bottom line is if a buyer is going to ask for it. Right. That's, I think,
done a lot of net sheets recently where
a lot of net
not had
sheets
to do them before, and not because of commission, but people are tight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you've got interest rates are higher, they're paying more in closing costs, like whatever this looks like. It's a market where sellers and buyers are more aware of their finances than they probably ever were before. I mean, I think back in 2021, it was like 2020, like interest rates at 3%, like it was just, I mean, yeah, no one thought about it like that. But I mean, the beauty is that it depends on where you're at too, like, will that house sell in 2 seconds, multiple offers, no matter what, you know, versus a house that might sit on the market. You got to know the market that you're selling into, and having those conversations with them. So with that being said, does anyone have any thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
I knew that was gonna
So
happen.
you're sitting at lunch, you're not, because the conversations that I'm having with my buyers and sellers who are kind of in the real estate mode is very different than, so you're sitting at lunch and the person next to you says, hey, what's this
What's this all
lawsuit?
about?
What's your elevator speech? Because when people hear, I've been trying to call it settlement, because when I think of lawsuit, I think, praise the Lord, I've never needed to hire Tim Misney. So lawsuits are because something bad happened to somebody, right? I mean, you're going along with a happy life. You don't hire an attorney.
I use the same diagram. The
But
same
no, I mean, you're just talking to somebody, an elevator speech.
you find
What's
something
this
to write down
lawsuit
on?
about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense.
Yeah.
Someone agreed to pay 6%. It's my business what I do with that money, right? You didn't say 6% and it's gonna get split 4 ways. So I say, this all started in the Midwest. I don't even know how many fake lawsuits came out after it. Copycat lawsuits, hundreds.
Couldn't tell you.
Hundreds. And I just say, this is how the business worked for 40 years. Everyone really was happy until some group of people said, I had no idea that I was being overcharged. And I say, how could you think you were overcharged if you agreed to a fee? And that's all you paid. You paid that fee. You're mad at how I used my own money that was on your behalf to sell your house and get you a great offer. It doesn't say I agree to pay 6% on my listing and then divide it by 4 and what percent I give to each person. I said, but someone said, nope, this was unfair and this jury agreed to it. And now we have to have all these new change forms and you don't have to offer it. But the reason that people were upset is because they were being overcharged. We inflated prices on houses because we were paying the buyer's agent. That is the crux of the lawsuit, correct? I think inflation of
Sort of.
prices.
I mean, that was the primary argument.
So then I say, it's worked. People are getting more money for their houses now than ever before, which is true. Even if you sold your house 6 months ago and you listed again, who said they were relisting a house in 6 months?
I think that
Are
was.
you gonna list it the same price or higher?
Oh,
How that money was determined was upfront, 6%. So if you want to lower it, that's fine, but you're going to miss a huge chunk of people that can't afford to come up with 3% or 2% or 2.25%, whatever number you came up with. But please expect to lower your price then. Because if that was the argument that prices were overinflated and we didn't know we were paying somebody and you want to lower the amount you're paying, your price has to come down. I really think it's a ridiculous lawsuit. If you can't stop. It really is.
Yeah, we want this.
And I say, but feel free to read any of the hundreds of articles on any news source about it. There was no nefariousness to this, none, and no one claims it. It's just. Well,
yeah. Well, I think one thing I like that she said a few times now, is when she does her diagram, she splits it 4 ways, not just 2 ways. And I think that's really, really good for an awareness thing for your buyers or your sellers, because when they're looking at that, they get their they get their settlement statement. They're like, oh my gosh, I paid you $10,000 for this. Like, we got multiple offers and sold it in 3 weeks. Like, you didn't have to do anything. Well, it's like, first of all, you got that because of me, you know, what we did to list your house. But at the end of the day, it also helps to show them that this is not just my money, right? This is not just the buyer's agent's money. Like, we are not keeping that full amount for ourselves. And I think that that's also nice because it does kind of help take off a little bit of that stigma of, you know, how much money is going to you directly too. So I like that you do that. Does anyone else have a good elevator speech that they use, that they've been using with, you know, cookout, picnics, family lunches, whatever?
I think if you just relate it to a different industry, so for example, if you have a lawyer, you don't ask the lawyer how they're using their money, right? I mean, because it's probably not going to all go to them, it might go to services. So to me, I feel like if you relate it to another industry, there's fees, there's you're paying people all over the place, but you're not questioning what they're doing with the money. So I kind of relate it to another industry.
Well, and I think that it kind of comes down to just an awareness thing. I mean, at the end of the day, like I feel like the more not just overly positive just to be positive, but you know, making it where it's really truly in the client's best interest that this is happening. Like, hey, at the end of the day, like this is a good thing in some ways because now every single client is going to be aware of how they're compensating their agent, right? And who it's coming from. And you have a choice in the matter. Like the buyers have a choice in the matter now, right? The sellers have a choice in the matter now. So I think that, you know, if you try to turn it around, I always say like make it about them, right? Like make it about them, less about us. I feel like that will help take some of the pressure off of like us as agents that are making these changes and requiring these things, you know, but make it where it's actually benefiting them, right?
And I'm super data driven because of my background. And I think that we're kind of living in the Wild West right now. Not even kind of, like, I think.
I've said that for years.
Yeah, it's kind of the Wild West. So I have absolute plans to look at, you know, data sorts by community or school district on, you know, as of August 17th, you know, August 17th to September 17th, what % of new listings were each of those blocks? Looking to see which ones closed quickly, which ones had a reduction, which ones changed, because data drives decisions and gives us more confidence in telling things. So
yeah,
I think that'll be, we can't do that yet because we don't have that data. But my question is, if it's yes, no, negotiable, are those concessions going to show at closing in the bottom part of the MLS page?
Well, the concessions field isn't going to go away, the seller concessions field.
But how it's
close it out.
Right.
To know for a fact what someone.
I don't think you'll ever know.
I think there's no answer yet at the MLS as to how they're going to track it, but I think we may get to a place where we separate out buyer broker compensation from concessions as like a closing to close it out. Primarily because it's equally necessary for an appraiser as the concessions field. So it's still unclear as to what's even legal or not. Tracking, you know, tracking concessions, because then as soon as you, like the argument has been, even keeping old commission in the MLS, which they're at the moment going to hide that as of August 12th. That may come back. They're going to keep the data, but it'll be hidden. But
so if you look back on itself in 2020, that's when you blank.
It should be after the 12th. But the reason being because the statement's been made that if we show how much commission people paid, that also somehow creates a barrier to make it negotiable in the future, right? Like this, the crux of this whole thing is this idea that like because it was, it is, which means it always will be or something. So that's it's still gray as to whether or not that will be able to contract in the future or not. But the concessions field will still be there on the closeout page for sure, where you're putting an actual number in.
Right, but what that number encompasses is TBD at this point.
At the moment, it's not going to look any different than it looks today. There's been no.
So we might see a lot of them.
You might see a lot more of that,
yeah.
With large numbers.
Where appraisers have to call the listing agents to get that.
Probably.
Well, again, at the moment, I would assume that listing agents will put it in the concessions field as to what buyer broker compensation was paid. They'll just put, because that's a field when you close out a listing.
When you close out the listing, the concession field, I
So
gotcha.
concessions can be synonymous with buyer's compensation, buyer's agent compensation.
Well, at the moment, you could pay a buyer's agent compensation two ways. A seller could pay it, well, three ways. A seller could pay it, a listing broker could pay it, or a buyer could pay it. The seller could give the buyer money to pay it, which is what makes it a concession.
Yeah. So on that topic, as we wrap up today, I have a couple of updates for you guys because this is really what's going to help us, I think, upcoming forms. So we have the exclusive right to sell, which is going to be updated for us. So that will reflect these changes. And I think that's going to be really, really powerful for you when you're having these conversations. It will help a lot, I promise. The other thing that's being updated is how the compensation is broken up will change on that, just so you know. And then authorization to market a concession is going to be in there too, so that we have authorization to say we're offering X concession or we're offering a concession, whatever it might be. So we have that authorization from our sellers to make sure that we're, allowed to say that to a buyer's agent or anyone else. The purchase agreement is also going to be updated. So that's going to have a new field at the bottom, which is basically the compensation agreement at the end of the day. So instead of having to have an addendum put together with all of this, it's going to break it down in the purchase agreement, which is going to be nice because as you're sending offers in, it's not one more form that you're having to provide. It's just written in there. So it's normal, right? I'm sure that our lenders are happy about that too, because then it will specify for them. It'll all be in the it'll be in the bottom, basically, in the end.
How is it different that we already have?
It doesn't say who's paying it.
Correct. So it's not broken up because right now you have sellers.
It doesn't say who's paying it. It says the seller's proceeds is paying it. That's all it says.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the buyer's paying it. It doesn't say the listing broker's paying it. It could say any of those things.
And most people just write per MLS.
Correct. So that's gonna go away.
The people involved usually don't even know.
Right. So again, so that's gonna be something that's gonna be updated. It'll be really easy to follow. It'll be easy for you to read and use that, very user friendly. So when you guys are filling that in, that's gonna help a lot of this too, just with like clarity when it
I'll
comes
tell you,
to.
like, one of the primary reasons for that is not only to be in keeping with the settlement, but also like we've had our first opportunity recently with an agent here to charge the buyer commission on top of what the seller was offering that actually did it. Most of the time if we've got an agreement for 3% and we go sell a listing that's paying 3 and 2, we take the 3 and 2 and move on.
Yeah.
Right. In this case, she wanted what she put on the buyer agreement, but she didn't talk about it when they wrote the offer because there's no avenue to do so really. Right. So in this case, it worked out and the buyers ended up paying it, but in the future, you'll have that opportunity every time you're writing an offer to make sure that you're clear with your client about the fact that, hey, like the agreement that we signed a month ago was for X. In this situation, the seller has said they agreed to pay Y. We didn't ask for any concessions to cover Z, which is the difference between X and Y. So understand that Z is and that field will be filled out. And it's gonna say that they owe $1,800, whatever it is, depending on the transaction. But without that in there, agents won't even
So
have a
I've
conversation
been
with the buyer.
adding, when it says half of whatever fees happy, what's the buyer responsible for? There's always that blank X that we always write none. I've been checking that and writing buyer agency for compensation.
Good.
Because I figured that's where it should go.
For right now.
For right
And then
now.
I think once we get this updated, then it will be more clear in the contract that way.
And total change of topic. I received an offer for a listing and it was their brokerage's purchase agreement, but it was the state of Ohio buyer agency agreement that required seller and buyer to sign it.
Was it buyer agency agreement or buyer
Buyer
compensation
agency.
agreement?
Buyer agency, I represented the seller. and
The
we
state
had
one
to
doesn't
sign-
have the seller's signature. I think you might have seen a buyer compensation agreement because that one asks both parties to sign.
Okay.
On the
That's
state
weird.
one. So what we're doing is actually, we're gonna provide our own buyer compensation agreement specifically for a situation where the buyer's agent doesn't have one. So that if it's not in their contract and they don't have their own compensation agreement, we have one to provide.
Okay.
That will state, this is how things are getting paid out. So again, like preemptive to the escrow instructions. It's just double protecting ourselves to make sure that we don't have the mistakes that happen, that come up at the end of the day, like, crap, we didn't realize that this is, there's a discrepancy here. So, yeah, I'm thinking that that's probably what you saw, but if not, I'll look at it and see. So, yep.
Quick question if I could, just while we have Janelle and David in the room too. Do you think, in your opinion, would it make people's lives easier and understand how you mess with dollars, but instead of asking for percentage from the seller when you're in a listing appointment, just have like asking for a set dollar amount based on the list price and offering a set dollar amount to the buyer's agent instead of messing with percentages?
You can do whatever you want to do.
I would never, because you set the time for your buyer agency. And if they're looking at 250 and their financial situation changes and they wind up buying 400,000, you've locked into whatever that number was for 200,000.
Are you talking about on the listing side or on the buyer side?
Either. I mean, either.
Okay.
My initial question was for both, but you could do like a percentage total and then offer a flat to the buyer's agent, a flat dollar amount to the buyer's agent.
I mean, that's,
That just came out today with $13,000 flat.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you can do anything that the seller wants to do. All this is negotiable, like however you want to structure it for yourself. Yeah. Yep.
Oftentimes the lender gives a limit on how much concession they can offer. So what if my buyer needs 5% concession back from?
They need to be able to seller paid buyer commission is not counted concession. So you can say, all right, this FHA, I want 6% seller credit cost and 3% commission, 9% together.
And that's also
And that's
why
new.
and that's why we're doing the breakdown in the
That's always
compensation.
existed. You just have to differentiate the dollars. This is commission, this is concession.
And that's what we're doing on our compensation agreement, is so that it's gonna state what is for commission, what is for concessions to the buyer. You know, so that that's clear for the lenders.
Wait, just being on other mastermind to ask what's a good elevator pitch. I've heard the settlement, I always, like, there was some, what happened with this lawsuit, I said the settlement was based on transparency. We've always, and then you can bring out your chart or whatever you need to do, because half the time the seller would just sign it, buyers had no idea that their agents are being compensated. So, hey, this whole thing was based off transparency. I already do this, Jen already does it. So it's really nothing's changed, it's just being more transparent with where the money is coming from and how much you agree to pay for my services. So another thing though that we were at Keller Williams and Mentor, Noreen Marlowe wrote the state, that it was part of state contract. The word commission is really kind of getting to become a no-no, it's more compensation. And also saying, this is what we've done for 40 years. It's more like, this is historically what has been done, customarily. However, so you're not wrapping in that 6%. It is semantics. However, you're going to have some of your buyers or some of your sellers say, well, it used to be 6%. Well, it doesn't have to be anymore. It can be A, B, and C. But I think that if you say the lawsuit is basically based on transparency, and this is how we do it. This is how we differentiate ourselves. That just kind of glances over the fact of all the negativity. And if you're already doing it, then it doesn't really apply to you as an agent. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, I love that, for sure. Well, we ran long even though we only did one, so I mean, I feel like this was great. Yeah, no, this was great. Can we all just say, thank you again for Jen for awesome. And we're done. So if you guys are sticking around.